Welcome, bass fishing fans. Today, we have got one of my favorite lures. Imagine that, guys, another favorite lure. How can that be? But this really is one of my favorites. Froggy. Of all the reaction type baits that you can throw, of all the top waters, this is it. It does not get any better. For whatever reason, bass hate frogs. And they want to kill them and eat them at every opportunity that they can get. And for us, as bass heads, doesn't get any better. It is the most exciting type of fishing, bass fishing, that you can do. The strike is, it looks like an explosion has gone off next to your bait most of the time when they hit a frog. It's full combat fishing. It's not a finesse technique by any stretch of the imagination. Our 7-foot medium heavy rod will get it done. There are some provisos though. If you live in a lake that has scattered vegetation and it's not thick, you can stick with your 7-foot medium heavy rod. You need a Foster reel on the casting rod. Although you could fish a frog on a spinning rod, guys, I do not recommend that you do it. You may get away with a smaller frog. This is made for going into the thick stuff. My recommendation for frog fishing is a heavy fast action rod. Somewhere between 6'10" and I would say probably 7'3", 7'4". If you are a vertically challenged individual as I am, that means short, I would go with the shorter rod because it's one of those techniques where you're going to have your rod in a downward position and you're working the rod very similar to say a topwater popper or a jerk bait, and you end up just bashing the rod tip off the side of the boat. It doesn't work. It's also more difficult if you're fishing from the shore because it's the same thing. You're going to end up just hitting the rod tip on the ground. If you're a taller guy, go for a slightly longer rod if that's what you want. You need a stout rod. It should be a fast tip, but you need a stout rod. A lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time when you fish frogs, you're fishing them in the thickest stuff that you can find. That's what they were designed to do. Although you could fish them in open water if you wanted to, and there are a couple of variations of frogs that you probably would do quite well with in open water, these guys are made to throw where you cannot throw other stuff. So if it's like this and nasty, this is going in there. With that being said, this is a braid bait. Straight braid. You don't want to be throwing anything else with a frog. Nothing. Not a soft plastic frog or a normal hollow-bodied frog. Braid. And this is going to be a personal choice thing. I have fished frogs on 40-pound braid quite successfully in not quite as heavy cover. And I have fished frogs on 80-pound braid in thick mats. I like to go for the middle ground. I am super comfortable fishing a frog on 65-pound braid. When the fish eats the frog and turns back into that thick stuff, you need to be able to get it out there. So it needs 3 things. It needs a stout rod. It needs a Foster reel. Whatever you like, but not a slow reel. So the fastest reel that you can afford within your budget. And braid. My personal braid that I like is Sunline FX2. It's the frogging and flipping braid, and I like it in the green color. That's just my personal choice. It's the braid I prefer. There are many, many, many different types of frogs. I would imagine that most of the major tackle companies has got some other version of a frog, be it a soft frog or a floating frog or both. There's a lot of stuff to choose from, guys. You, like with all other types of fishing tackle, you are going to find the frog that you like. Later on in the video, I'll mention a couple of the brands that have done really well for me. But the most important thing with a frog is the hook. If it's got a rubbish hook on it, it's going to open up or it's going to snap off. And that is all to do with where you're fishing that bait. And as I've just explained to you, this is a technique where we're going in the jungle. So it is in the thick stuff. You also don't want a frog with a body with the body material that's too hard. It has to be able to collapse. When you're fishing a frog, they tend to get water inside them. So you need to, every now and then, you've got to just push down, you just pss, 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 and it will squirt the water out of these little holes at the back of the frogs. Different frogs have got them in different places. This one, the holes are over there. This one, the water mostly comes out over here. This is a spur frog. And they get beaten up a lot. So you need to have a couple of them on your boat. As with all things artificial lure, as we've spoken about many times before, if you find one that you like and that works for you on the body of water that you're fishing, buy some more and have them on hand in the boat. They do get beaten a bit. They do stand up to being punished. But if you live in a lake that's got any toothy critters in, like pike or muskies or pickerel or anything like that, they'll shred them. Absolutely shred them. The first time I went to America, we went to fish at La Crosse, Wisconsin, on the Mississippi River, and there are many pike there and some muskies, I believe. And I tied on a brand new frog, and within 15 minutes, it was in pieces. The pike annihilated it. It was just hanging off the hooks. So if you don't have toothy critters, that's fine. But always have a couple of frogs. You'll find your favorites very quickly. This is a bait that you want fish to be looking up at, because frogs live on the surface and it's meant to be a frog. And it's got to be moving all the time, and then pauses, and then moving all the time and pauses, just like a frog would. Something that will benefit you greatly is if you watch videos online of how frogs swim, or if you are blessed enough to have a lake close to where you live, where you can get out there and go and observe frogs even better, and try and mimic that pattern of how they swim when you fish your frog. It's a lot of fun. And just to give you an example, we'll talk about the retrieves later, obviously, but the way that these are designed, they have a weight at the back, so they sit slightly head up. And if you watch a frog swim, even though most frogs don't have legs on them, most frog lures don't have legs on them, you'll see when a frog swims, it kind of does this in the water. As it's pulling itself forward, its head is doing this in the water. And that's exactly what that mimics. Dean Rojas was very clever when he designed this Spro Bronzi frog. I bet if you asked most bass anglers what their favorite way to catch bass was on top, they would say a frog bait. It's that much fun. It truly is, guys. Let's dive into this. Let's get to the close-ups. Let's start looking at a few different things. Soft plastic frogs. And then all the different varieties of floating frogs. You don't have to have all of them, guys. This is an obsession thing. It's a disease for me, and I have to have all of them. I do not have all of them, but I would like to have all of them to try them. It is a lot of fun. A lot of fun. This is also a good technique to teach children, because if you want your kids to be truly rattled, let them throw a frog and have a fish come up and bust it on the surface. The excitement level goes from mediocre to instantly. And to see kids experience that, it's a joy. It's an absolute joy. Let's get into the close-ups and let's get into a little bit more detail here and talk about these exciting baits. Okay, let's get into it. So, we've spoken a little bit generally about frogs. Let's talk about the different types of frogs because there are many. So let's start off with some easy stuff. Now guys, in my soft plastic baits library, I list way more different kinds of soft plastic frogs. But for today's exercise, we're just going to use a couple of my favorites because there's way too many to get into in the amount of time that we've allocated for ourselves here. So this is a buzzing type frog or a buzzing type toad. So this is a zoom horny toad. You can see the legs have got the little hooks on them there and just causes it to buzz like that when you retrieve it. We'll talk about the retrieves a bit later. And then this is the OG type style, the swamp frog, whatever you want to call it. It's got more booted feet on it. And this is a lot louder buzz. It makes a lot more commotion on the water. Both of them have got flat bellies, big chunky bits of plastic to get the hooks in and that kind of stuff. And every single shape, color, under the rainbow. The thing that you'll find with most soft plastic frogs that's similar is the weight of the bait. They are nice heavy baits, and that's so that you can throw them. So that's the soft plastic frogs. Let's get into the standard type of floating frog. Again, many different sizes, many different brands. And guys, these are all my frogs, so some of them look a bit battered because I catch quite a lot of fish on them. So these are the Spros, bronze eyes. That is the 65 size, I believe. Big beefy hooks. There's a weight at the back to make it float in a slightly head up position for when you start your retrieve. Line tie at the front, and then some other type of skirt. These skirts I've actually replaced twice. I've put in a silicone skirt there to test that out. They usually come with a rubber skirt. And then this one I think is a slightly smaller one. Yeah, I'm not sure on the size. It could be a 60 or a 55. This one's supposed to represent like a bluegill type color. Same deal. Nice big strong hooks. I believe they're gamakatsus. So that's those type of floating frogs. Then you have a single tail floating frog. This one's a lot softer. I believe this one was made for catching snakehead, but I have other ones the same as this. Use them very successful to fish for bass. Then tiny one, these are my favorites. You can see how battered that thing is. This is a live target. Smaller hooks, smaller weight, smaller body size. That's probably, I don't know, a little bit over 1 inch long. And I like to use these early in the season when the frogs have just gone from their tadpole phase into frog phase, but they work all year round as well, depending on what frogs you have in the lake that you fish in. Very cool frogs. Okay, so let's just leave it at that for the standard floating frogs. There's hundreds of different types and brands and colors, and you'll find the ones that you like. The next type of floating frog that you would get is a popping frog. So here's a couple of my favorite ones. Again, a Spro. That's a Spro baby popping frog. You can see how tiny that one is. And it's exactly the same construction as the normal floating frogs. It's just got the popping mouth in it, so that when you're retrieving it, it goes bloop, 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 like the poppers that we've discussed in a previous episode. And then this one here, this is a bigger individual. This is a Booyah Pad Crasher. This is a wonderful bait as well. This same deal, just a bigger version of that. This thing makes a lot of commotion in the water. Great bait. And then here's a Japanese version of that. This is, I think it's a Kahara. I think it's a jackal. And just a little bit more finesse and a strange color. I know it looks weird. I've caught tons of fish on this thing as well. And I have another one, which is a plain white one. But great little bait. It's a Kahara frog. Then we move on to something a little bit stranger. Again, this is a Japanese bait. This is called a Berezovsky frog. This frog doesn't have the conventional legs. It has these soft legs that face forward, and when you wind it, it looks like a jitterbug or a crazy crawler on the surface. But it's still a soft frog. It's got a different type of weighting system, hard plastic bottom, and a single hook in this one. And then this one is made by Depths. But still, same principle. It's a floating frog. And then the final one I've got for you today, there are many, many more. And this is just more of a kind of a frog with articulating legs. I believe the original version was Tekel. I can't even remember what brand this is. It's probably an El Cheapo one. But same construction as the floating frog, and then it's just got some wires running from the back of the bait here all the way through, and then it's got these little legs that spin. This thing is really obnoxious in the water. It's a very cool little bait, but it works. And they all have their time and purpose, and hopefully we can get into that a little bit later. So let's talk a little bit about rigging. None of the those guys on that side there that I've showed you have any special kind of rigging. You've got to be careful with the legs with them a little bit. I tend to cut my legs a bit shorter. You don't have to do it. You can see this one here. This is a newer bait. This one hasn't been trimmed. If you compare the length of the legs, I just find with longer legs, these are the legs here, these bits, it just restricts them from walking side to side. So I like to cut them a little bit shorter, probably around about 1.5 inches. And that just works for me. But that doesn't mean that that's something you have to do. That's just the way I like my frog to be. Okay, so no special rigging for that. As with everything else that I do, I fish them, as we discussed, on all frogs, on straight braid. And I do a straight Palomar knot, boom, tie it onto the frog, and we're off to the races. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Now let's talk about the rigging of the soft plastic frogs, because they can be a little bit trickier. I recommend that you use a hook that has a screw lock. I also recommend that you use a super wire hook, thick wire hook. Could you use a normal extra wide gap offset wide gap worm hook? Yes, you could. You'd probably get away in most frogs with either a 4.0 or a 5.0. The one thing that you'll find though, when you throw frogs, you tend to put quite a bit of effort into throwing them, is they slip down the hook. So you want to go with something that's got one of these, it's a spring lock in it. This one's got a centering pin in. They don't all have the centering pin. So you take the centering pin, push it into the nose of the frog there, and then you just wind until all that's sticking out is the part that goes through the hook eye. Then you would rig the plastic as you would normally with any other plastic bait. Mark it with your thumb. You want to come through the center of the frog, and you can see in this particular frog there's a hook slot. Lots of them have got that. And then just trap the point under the plastic like that, and you're ready to go. Many different styles of frog hook. I'll show you another example. This is one that I actually make. We're going to use this on the horny toad. This is a Stanley frog hook, and I've added a buzzbait blade to it just because the frog is not obnoxious enough and we need to make it even more obnoxious. So I've added that. There are commercially available ones. You can even get commercially available full-size buzzbaits. They call them toad sleds. So this one doesn't have the centering pin, so all you do is you just line up the end in the center of the frog, push it on a little bit, and just wind that guy on there. This has got a nice big spring on it to hold the frog. Same deal. Make sure the eye is flat. Okay, now you'll notice that one has got a double hook on it. So what you do is you bend the bait back, just measure it first, it's about there, and you push both hooks through at the same time. And you can see on the horny toad, it's got two lines. Let's see if we can get that to focus. Two lines running down the back of the toad. And what I like to do is I just like to line up those hooks with those two lines. Pull the bait back slightly and just slip the points in. And you can see how weedless that is. It's beautiful. And just with that little buzzing blade on the front of it. You don't need to have this. You could just use that with a normal worm hook or a double worm hook, or a double toad hook like that. And it's as weedless as it's going to get, guys. This one is very obnoxious. It makes a lot of noise, but I did that on purpose. Okay, this is a big topic, guys. There's been a lot to cover in this one, and still a lot more to come. Let's shut it down for today. We'll pick up tomorrow morning and finish off this topic. Thanks for joining us, guys.